What is going on, guys? This is Miasin. So today I kind of wanted to make a video discussing the difference between pure Snake Eyes and Farking Snake Eyes. A lot of players don't really know how to position them in the tier list. Is Farking the superior Snake Eyes version, or is the pure build better? And I feel like there's a lot of arguments for each side. It also depends on your environment, right? Because I don't think there's ever going to be a situation where the best deck is set in stones. It always gonna matter. Like, what people choose to play in any given tournament will always have a massive impact on what the most effective strategy will be in that tournament. And that's the reason why I think this kind of discussion is needed, because it allows us to kind of think better for next time and actually help us planify our deck building process in order to at least know where to go in case we know what people are about to play. But yeah, anyways, before going any further, I would really appreciate if you could smash the like and subscribe button. Thank you so much. You really are the best. It means the world to me. And I feel like I'm getting better and better. Hopefully, I won't be sick by the time I get to Australia. But then I'm also spending like a full week there. And I will be making some videos there, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I will keep making content. But anyways, let's get right into it. Alright, so first things first, what is the difference between the Farking Snake Eye engine and the pure Snake Eye engine? Like, what cards are they playing in common and what cards are different? So first of all, the amount of starters usually is the same. Everybody's playing 3 Snake Eye Ash, 3 Bonfire, 3 Wanted, 3 Diabell Star, and 3 Wanted, as well as 2 Populous. Even though the pure build, I've seen some deck lists with 3 Populous. I don't really think it makes too much sense because you still want to respect the normal summon rule of you don't want to draw too many like hands with like way too many cards that can not really do anything in your hand. You know, Populous doesn't really do much if you draw it in tandem with Snake Eye Ash. You have to choose between one or the other. And obviously Snake Eye Ash leads to a better end board because you're also getting Populous when you're normal summoning Snake Eye Ash. So whereas the other, you could also get access to Ash off of Populous, like if you summon it off of original, but it's not gonna lead to that much more because obviously you have to waste your original for the Snake Eye Ash and not for something like Jet Synchron in the pure build or Ponix in the Farking build. And the monster that you summon off of original is extremely relevant because it also makes the difference between a deck just being a mid-range deck or a combo deck or an FTK deck. For example, the Infernoid deck can summon Infernoid Decatron and do so much more than any of these decks, but the drawback is that you have to play a lot of bricks, and that is one of the reasons why even Farking is considered to be a deck that the pro players don't really want to play too much because the Farking cards are looking like bricks, but my argument today is that the pure Snake Eye cards, some of them are also kind of bricks depending on how you see things. Anyways, there's also that one of original Synfospo Snake Eye. Some people are also playing 2. I think that makes sense in the pure build, but not really in the Farking build. It's kind of like an extra 1-card starter. If you have that and any monster that you can place on the field, or any card rather, that's even better because it works with Divine Temple. And then we've got 1 for 1, which is, you know, basically an unsearchable one of. Nobody's playing Triple Tactic Thrust. That card's not really worth it because it's only going to be getting your consistency cards when you're going second, and it does play into Drool, and Drool is not supposed to be a good card against you, so why make it good against you, right? You might as well just take advantage of the fact that the Snake Eye engine is ridiculously good through Drool and Logbird. Anyways, Snake Eye Oak is always a one of, and then Flamb Bridge, this is one of the most interesting cards. I see this card as a major brick. When I used to play pure Snake Eyes, I was only playing 1 Flamb Bridge, and for some reason, everybody's playing the pure Snake Eyes deck is playing 2 Flamb Bridge. I understand why. There are some specific combos where you want to be able to play 2 because you're sending like your Oak and like a Flamb Bridge in the Spell and Trap zone to summon another Flamb Bridge so that you can place the IP Masquerade from the graveyard and in the Spell and Trap zone. It's a Snake Eye Ash 1-card combo that ends on Appaloosa for 3, as well as Flamb Bridge IP. It's not too bad, but it's like, are you really playing the second Flamb Bridge just for that? Alternatively, you could also play the second Flamb Bridge in Farking. I think, if anything, Flamb Bridge is less of a brick in the Farking deck because this time you can destroy Flamb Bridge from your hand with Farking Island and trigger, get a lot of advantage off of that. Whereas if you are playing the pure build, Flamb Bridge is more of a brick and you're playing 2. The only way you can really make it useful is if you're discarding it off of Diabell Star, or if you're going second and you're going into Nightmare Phoenix and then discarding the Flamb Bridge. This, it's not like you can really chain block because obviously it's going to happen in a separate chain link, but there are some other like nice ways of playing with Flamb Bridge. And I think, again, even though this might sound crazy, the Farking deck, I think, uses Flamb Bridge better than the pure build because of the reason I just mentioned with Farking Island, which is weird when you factor in the fact that the pure build is playing 2 and the Farking version is only playing 1. But yeah, so far, other than Flamb Bridge, basically both versions are playing the exact same amount of engine starters, so it's really not like you can say that the pure Snake Eyes deck is that much more consistent, but it really gets down to like the microscopic details. So what are the cards that are basically exclusive to pure Snake Eyes and not Fire King? Well, I just mentioned the second copy of Flamb Bridge because Fire King is now choosing to play 2 Flamb Bridge. Even though they could, I don't really recommend it because they're not playing Divine Temple, and some Fire King deck lists are playing Divine Temple. I used to play it. I played it at YCS Costa Rica. I do believe it's a mistake, though. I didn't really like it too much in my YCS experience because, honestly, for me, Divine Temple was only a card that allowed me to play even more when I was already playing. The card on its own doesn't really do much of anything. Even if you draw it in pure Snake Eyes, it's kind of it's not a neg 1, it definitely isn't, but it doesn't feel insane. Like, it only really does something if you have like a hand of full hand traps, because then you hand trap your opponent to death, you place a Snake Eye Ash, and then when your opponent plays, then you get to play. But in the Fire King build, my issue is that now you have 2 field spells that kind of contradict each other, and you always have to choose one or the other. Like, people keep using the argument of, even in Fire King it's insane because you can play through Nib. I don't really see it. I just don't see it because you will eventually have to replace your Divine Temple with a Fire King Island, and then you lose the protection from Divine Temple. So you can't really lead with Fire King Island because once you replace Island with Divine Temple, your whole board gets picked apart. And if you lead with Divine Temple to then replace it with Fire King Island, you lose the protection to Nib. So I think you can kind of see where this is going. Divine Temple has way less synergy in the Fire King version than in the pure build. And I think in the pure build, this card is remarkably good, and definitely one of the reasons why they're doing so well, because it's so hard to nib them for value when they can constantly summon back either a Flamb Bridge from the spell and trap zone to put back the Masquerina, and then basically still have 2 interruptions on your own turn because they can go into SP and then banish, and then also double Farfa, and they can also protect their SP with Link Rebo because they're summoning back 2 monsters of Flamb Bridge. It's just really hard to get rid of all the advantage that they're always generating, not to mention that the pure build has way less ways of applying pressure with their main deck monsters. They rely a little bit more on the extra deck, but this field spell boosting the attack of all of your level 1 fire monsters matters infinitely more than people think. So yeah, Divine Temple is definitely a really key component to kind of just comparing pure Snake Eyes to Fire King Snake Eyes, and I think if anything, this is probably the MVP in the pure Snake Eyes deck. Jet Synchron is definitely one of the good ones. I used to really not like that card. The combos were just not really appealing to me. But I think the thing is, if you draw like Snake Eye Ash and Diabellstar, and you don't really have like a good game plan, you might think that it's redundant because it's kind of 2 cards that do the same thing, right? We have a 1-card starter, another 1-card starter, but when you are playing Jet Synchron, you are streamlining your deck and removing the redundancy from your deck and actually turning those kind of full gas hands into actual power hands that can put up a lot of interruptions. So for example, you're making a Borrowed Savage Dragon that's going to protect you from hand traps, and you're also going to be putting up a Baron de Fleur as well as a really nice board. So that's the reason why Jet Synchron does make sense. I don't think it should always be your priority. If you've got Snake Eye Ash as your 1-card combo, usually I don't like to search original. I like to search Divine Temple, personally, when I play pure, with the Populace, obviously. So that's the reason why Jet Synchron, I think it's more there so that it kind of helps you in situations where you would need it, but it's not really like, it's not the equivalent of Ponix, for example, in the Fire King version, because in the Fire King build, since we're not trying to play Divine Temple, because of the reason I just mentioned, your game plan is always going to be relying on original in order to summon the Ponix, and then get your Fire King play started from there. So Jet Synchron, not the same, so I don't think Jet Synchron is that insane, but it's still somewhat decent. And the other 2 cards that are played in the pure build but not in the Fire King build are actually very interesting because some people are actually choosing to cut them completely, and we have seen that in PAX team that got 2nd at YCS Las Vegas. People are playing pure, but like even like more pure than pure. Like they're even cutting the Birch and cutting the Magician Souls completely. Now, Magician Souls, to be completely honest with you, it wasn't really like that much of a staple in the pure build, but it was a really nice tech card because of Dark the Dark Charmer. So the goal of Dark was obviously to revive back your opponent's dark monster from the grave, usually a Diabellstar because it's really nice in the mirror match. But the cool thing about the Magician Souls is that it's searchable off of Dark when it dies. So if your opponent wanted to go Promethean Princess destroy your Dark, you'd go, okay, you know what? Actually, no problem. I actually have a search target because Diabellstar is not a search target for Dark when it dies because the defense is way too high. Magician Souls, though, on the other hand, it can be searched, and it's insane with Divine Temple. You get to send 2 cards and draw 2 cards, but realistically, it felt a little bit more like a win more. Even though sending Diabellstar and getting a Spellcaster on the board so you could go into Celine, it did look, you know, pretty promising. It was a one-of that usually didn't really matter too much. And that is the reason why in Pack's list, we were not seeing this card whatsoever. And Snake Eye Birch, I mean, it's an extender, but it's a bad extender. It's just not worth playing. It's kind of like Kurikawa. Like, you're playing Kurikawa because you're scared of Purely, but when are you ever facing Purely? Honestly, just never, right? So yeah, so far I count anywhere between 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 cards that are exclusive to the Pure Snake Eyes deck list. So the second Flamb Bridge, the Divine Temple, the Jet Synchron, the Birch, and potentially the Magician Souls. So if you're really choosing to go like all in with the Pure Snake Eye cards, you're playing 5 extra cards that, you know, the Fire King build is not playing. But if you're playing Fire King cards, then you're also playing a lot of cards that the Pure Snake Eyes build is not playing. So you're playing 1 Garunix, 1 Arvada, 1 Ponix, and then 1 Sanctuary, 1 Island, maybe 0 Sanctuary. And then Kirin is the most interesting card out of all of them because we have seen everything. We've seen 0 Kirins because of Hani making a mistake in his deck list. We've seen 1 Kirin, which I think is kind of crazy. I mean, we haven't really seen like people performing with 1 Kirin, but it is a concept. And we've seen a lot of people play 2 Kirin now, which I want to say is almost standard. And 3 Kirin is what people used to play in, you know, the first YCS Costa Rica. And people kind of streamlined and adapted from that. And they're cutting even more on the Fire King cards because, again, Fire King cards are not engine starters. They don't really do anything on their own. And obviously, I'm assuming that we're talking about Snake Eye Fire King, right? Not Pure Fire King, because that deck is not on the same level as every other ridiculous deck out there. So if you really want to go minimalistic, sorry, you're playing 6 Fire King cards, so 4 monsters and then the 2 field spell S cards. Sanctuary gets you to Island, but what is really cool about Sanctuary is that it allows Diabellstar to be a 1-card combo because you go Diabellstars, get your original, and then summon the Snake Eye Ash, Surge the Ponix, and then normal summon Ponix, plays the Sanctuary and then into Island. And then the Ash actually has something to send in order to transform itself into Flamb Bridge, and then you can link off into Sunlight Wolf and play from there. So that is the reason why it is really important to play Sanctuary, because some people are cutting Sanctuary. I think that is absolutely suicidal, although it can be a great card to side out going second. Same thing with a third or second Kirin if you're playing multiple copies. Now, if you are playing some additional Fire King cards, I think this is where you start playing into the argument of Fire King cards are bricks, and the Pure Snake Eyes deck is better for that. Circle of the Fire Kings is not a bad card per se. It actually gives more value to Ponix, but it's again an extender that doesn't really do that much more. Like, all you're really doing is you're trading 1 monster on your field for another fire in your grave. You're not going +1. If anything, I'd say you're going -1. And if you hard draw this card, usually it's going to be your discard for Diabellstar. It's not like super insane. It's not like you can use the argument of it makes you play through Imperm, because you have to already have a fire in your grave if you want to be able to like chain and dodge the Imperm. The circle is not really worth it. Skyburn, we're seeing this card everywhere in the OCG, and I don't understand why, but it's also just not good enough, unfortunately. And again, for the extra copies of Kirin, same argument, just like more bricks, I want to say. Barang, people completely cut this card. This card sucks. Like, it's just really, really bad. The combo, basically, you're playing Fire King as a combo deck. You're trying to summon as many monsters as possible turn 1. Barang makes you play the game a little more, you know, I'll do a little on my turn, and then a little on your turn, and then a little, and then it's just not. So yeah, Barang just sucks. Obviously, people have adapted past that. And the bad Fire King cards, I remember making a video about Rang Bali. A lot of people gave me crap for it. I just kept saying this card sucks, this card's really bad. Same thing with Skyburn and the Trap card. Like, you know, the shitty one that summons like a monster exactly from her hand, deck, and graveyard, whatever, like with like different types. Those cards, they require so much setup and they don't really do too much, so it's usually just never worth playing cards that are complicated for no reason. When the Fire King cards are supposed to be minimalistic and clean. And ironically, the only garbage Fire King monster that people are still somewhat playing is Fire King Avatar Kirin, but for obscure reasons. So whenever this card is destroyed, you get to foolish a fire monster from your deck to the grave. There are 3 applications for this card. You can either send Volcanic Scattershot, and you can kind of guess where this is going, or you can send Ash and then recycle it back with Sunlight Wolf, or you could send the Barrier Statue of Inferno and then revive it back with Promethean Princess and lock your opponent out of not summoning fire monsters. Obviously, this is a post-game 1 strategy when you know for a fact that your opponent is not playing a fire deck and maybe choosing to play like Board Breakers instead of Hand Traps, but your Barrier of Inferno can still get ran over by any monster with more than 1000 attack. So it's really only worth it if you also have a Link Rebo on the field. if you can achieve the soft lock, you will go places, but otherwise, and also Kieran is just not a card that you're trying to main deck whatsoever. It's pretty garbage. Anyways, there are some cards I think that are much better against Farking than against Pure Snake Eyes, which I think is another appeal to play Pure Snake Eyes instead of Farking. So for example, Cosmic Cyclone on Farking Island is huge, but Cosmic Cyclone on Divine Temple is not huge, honestly. Their life continues because they can play around Cosmic Cyclone in a really crafty way. So let's say they have Flamb Bridge with IP Masquerade and the Spell of Trap Zone and Divine Temple. They can wait until you summon a monster and then use the Divine Temple to summon the Masquerade, and then if you chain Cosmic either on the Divine Temple or the Masquerade, then they don't really care too much, because if you're trying to Cosmic the IP, they can chain the Flamb Bridge in order to summon the IP, because this is a quick effect, this is a trigger effect. So Flamb Bridge is a little more flexible, a little more proactive. And just like that, your Cosmic is kind of going neg 1 and not really trading for anything. Whereas again, against Farking, if you Cosmic their Farking Island, you're basically just regecking them. And that is definitely a big deal. So that is another nice appeal to play the pure build instead of Farking. And again, since you are playing maybe less bricks in your deck in a way, you can add even more consistency and brick even less by playing copies of Lullaby of Obedience, which yet again, and I mentioned this at the very beginning of the video, is only something that you can really afford to do when you are completely conscious of the environment that you are choosing to that you are playing in. So for example, if you are in like a tournament where everybody's playing the fire decks, then Lullaby is going to be insane because you keep having those mirror matches and it's always going to be doing something. Same thing with Crossout Designator. This is very good in a tier 0 format because not only do you get to call the opponent's hand traps that your opponent is obviously going to play, same thing as you, or you get to call your opponent's engine cards. So for example, if you weren't getting a hand trap, then you can call Snake Eye Ash against your opponent, and that's basically like a D-bearer for one card. That is really massive, or you can even call like Talent with Crossout, so this card is always insane. Same thing with Lullaby, and you have more space to play these cards in the pure build, even though your ceiling is lower with one Snake Eye Ash, what you can do, because you're not going to be going into Ponyx, and then leading into Sanctuary Island, and to Garunix, into Arvada, because you're cycling so many cards with one single card. You don't have the ability to do that in the pure build. You are more minimalistic, but also much more clean, and again, can play more non-engine, which I want to see is the main argument why people are choosing to go with pure. Now, I keep, talking about the positive aspects of the pure Snake Eyes deck, but what about the positive aspects of Farking? Again, the deck is more powerful, and if you're going second, for example, and you are not drawing any of your Farking cards, or even if you do, you can do so much going second because your Hita actually has real value since you can start crashing, and then you can search like a Ponyx or Garunix and then crash another monster maybe, and then special summon again and again and again. So even if a lot of your things are not really resolving, you can still indirectly get to any of your engine using Hita, whereas again, in the pure build, not really. Obviously, Dark is nice if you're playing Magician's Souls, because then when you're crashing Dark, you're doing something. But in the Farking build, it's just like, it never stops. Like, you always have ways of pushing, summoning even more monsters, and it just feels like Nibiru doesn't beat you whatsoever, because you never have to link off that Flamb Bridge early. You can keep that Flamb Bridge on the field without having to, use its effect to revive, and then you link off, you summon a bunch of, monsters, while getting Arvata in rotation, and then as soon as that, you summon that Princess to try to revive back your Arvata, your opponent has to Nibiru you, and then you still float on the Flamb Bridge, so you don't even have to rely on Divine Temple, and you can do that very efficiently with one single card, which is the beautiful aspect of the Farking version. So you can easily OTK with one single card, or just put up some gigantic boards. If you're going uninterrupted, then you're always pushing, you're always making an unbreakable board, I want to say. And against rogue decks, the Farking version just has a much higher ceiling, and it doesn't need to rely on drawing specific cards in order to win, because its engine is just the strongest in the game, I want to say. But then again, the Farking cards do lose much harder to soul release because, much harder to soul release than the pure build, because the pure build actually does make Omni Negates in the form of Baron and Warlord Savage Dragon. But the pure build does lose the Bestials, I want to say, because they are trying to rely on that IP Masquerada in the graveyard that they can place back with a Flamb Bridge, and if you can hit them with that Bestial, then it will have value. Whereas again, against Farking, the Bestials are pretty much useless because everything is fire and they don't really care about IP Masquerada whatsoever, and they're also rushing an Appaloosa very early. Even though, again, the pure build can also kind of do that, but their sequencing is going to be a little different. Anyways, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts. Who do you think is better, right? Farking Snake Eyes or pure Snake Eyes? I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. Peace.